right, so in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about inventory management and how that relates to working capital management. So when dealing with inventory management, it's important to note that different managers, even within a firm, could have very different incentives and views. So for instance, from a marketing perspective, the manager may be all focused on, let's have lots of product available so that when somebody places an order, we can fill that order. We don't have any problems. From a warehousing manager standpoint, we don't want to have too much inventory, or I have to start building more warehouses, or the warehouses get excessively full and it starts getting difficult to manage all of that. From a production manager standpoint, we like nice, stable production levels. We don't want big boosts and declines in terms of production speed. So we're trying to kind of manage that so we have nice, stable expectations for manufacturing. So all of that basically kind of feeds into, we've got different perspectives, and we're trying to make the best decision for the firm in terms of how much capital we should, or working capital we should allocate to having inventory on hand. So what are some ways we can do that? So one way that this can be kind of approached would be the ABC inventory system. The idea there is to basically group inventory into buckets or categories. So category one, or group A, would be we're going to take very expensive items that constitute a very large investment. We're going to track that very carefully. So we may not have a lot of numerically of those items, but since they're so expensive, they may account for a large proportion of the inventory amounts. We're going to track that very carefully. We're going to focus on that a lot, kind of make sure that that product is moving effectively in terms of sales and so forth. Group B would be sort of that next level, the next tier down, next expensive set. So it's not the most expensive, it's not the least. And we're going to track that a bit more, or less than Group A, but a bit more than Group C. So not as much scrutiny, perhaps, as the Group A, not as much day-to-day kind of focus, but still a pretty fair amount of focus because it is still decently expensive, but it's not like the most expensive kind of set category. And then you get down to Group C, where basically it's probably a whole bunch of items of inventory, don't actually add up to a whole lot of value. They may not necessarily sell vast volumes on a regular basis. And so Group C is going to receive probably the least amount of focus and scrutiny because even though it's a lot of items, it just doesn't necessarily add up to a whole lot of value. And so it's not as much of a concern. There's not as much capital kind of tied up in it. So that'd be kind of one approach to kind of subdivide inventory, focus more on the inventory that is contributing more to the actual value of the total inventory. Then we have the economic order quantity model. And basic idea here is we're going to look at sort of order costs and carrying costs. So order costs would be, the cost of doing the paperwork and putting in the order, things like that. If there are, some kind of stocking fees or something associated with whoever I'm buying from, or maybe if I get bulk discounts, if I buy a whole lot in bulk, it's going to try to factor in all those costs associated with actually completing an order, what would the effective bulk discounts would be, things like that. Try to put all those together to get to ordering costs and how that relates to the quantity that's ordered. Then we're also going to look at carrying costs. And carrying costs are basically going to look at how much does it cost to store the inventory and warehouse it, and if I have to insure it or keep it chilled or whatever. So we're going to look at all the costs associated with keeping the inventory on hand. And if you are thinking about this, on the one hand, ordering costs, probably ordering more in bulk is going to tend to make my ordering costs lower. On the other hand, if I order in bulk and I have a huge amount of inventory, my carrying costs are going to go up because I now have to have bigger warehouses and expend more money and resources on that. So the idea behind the economic order quantity models, we're going to put those together. We're going to try to figure out, all right, given how order costs vary with volume of inventory, and given how carrying costs vary with the quantity of inventory, we're going to try to figure out the level of inventory that basically achieves the lowest total cost overall, because that would be the most efficient amount of inventory to order. That would then lead to kind of a related note, and that is basically the idea of a reorder point. And the reorder point is basically going to look at how many days of lead time, how long from when I order to when I actually receive the inventory. So how many days of lead time do we need? And then also how much am I actually using on a daily basis? So I need to kind of factor in that, all right, well, if it's going to take 10 days from when I order to when the stuff shows up, how much am I selling? And I'm going to put those together to basically figure out, all right, when my inventory reaches this level, I better be putting an order in to make sure that I receive what I need in a timely manner. And that kind of leads into the idea of a just-in-time inventory system. The idea of just-in-time is basically all about efficiency and minimizing the amount of resources tied up in inventory. So it's all about limit that inventory. So just as I'm running out of a certain amount of parts or something like that for whatever it is I'm producing, the delivery truck is backing up to my loading dock and dropping off the next shipment. Now that's kind of the idea. Now the advantage of that is it's kind of a lean approach. I don't have a whole lot of money tied up in inventory. This is more efficient. That's wonderful. Downside, if you have any kind of supply chain disruption, this could be a big problem. So if you have a volcano goes off somewhere, tsunami hits somewhere in Japan or whatever else, if you've got a global supply chain and you had a plan for how, all right, this is all going to work out, we're going to make sure we're going to get all these spare parts just in time, and then something disrupts your supply chain, tariffs arrive, things like that, whatever. All of a sudden, that can be a real disruption and potentially a real problem. So there are advantages and disadvantages to that just-in-time kind of approach as well. The last one I'm going to talk about is going to be the system for resource control approach to inventory management. And the first, they're subdivided into 3 pieces here. The first one's going to be the materials requirement planning, or MRP. The idea there is basically to look at the actual materials that are necessary for the production process and so forth, and essentially to have a whole approach, maybe software, things like that are monitoring how I'm using those different items, make sure we're ordering them in a timely manner and so forth. The next step is the manufacturing resource planning 2, or MRP 2. This one, notice the use of the word resource instead of materials requirement. So manufacturing resource instead of materials. So the materials requirement is more about like the things that are needed specifically in the production. The manufacturing resource planning is focusing on a little bit more broad set of inputs. So it could include things like the effective labor costs and things like that, and perhaps other financial metrics, accounting metrics, et cetera, to try to figure out when the ideal point is to order more and ideal levels of inventory to have and so forth, once factoring in the different inputs that are a little bit more broad than just the actual materials themselves. And ultimately, that starts getting into kind of taking a bigger step back, kind of the enterprise resource planning as a whole, which is again trying to have a perhaps software or things like that, a system for trying to integrate a plan across different divisions and departments within a business to make sure that things are working as efficiently as possible. And ultimately, the goal across all of these is relatively similar, which is we're trying to have the proper level of inventory that is not having too much, because if we have too much, then that gets inefficient. But I also don't want to have too little, because then I run the risk of running out, and that's inefficient as well. So it's kind of, again, constantly that tension of just how much should I have, because I need it, but it's also kind of inefficient to have a bunch of inventory. So it's the ongoing tension with most of the current assets. I need them, but I kind of don't like them. But I do need them, but I kind of don't like them. So from that standpoint, importantly, again, I don't really like having inventory. I like selling inventory. That's an important distinction to think about when evaluating inventory management, which does mean we're going to have some, but we have to be careful about how much. Hopefully this video has been helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.